I remember Rage 1. It was a bit slow to get into, but once I had reached the credits, I was satisfied with that game. To me, it was a good game, so Rage 2 was a no-brainer. Unlike the first game, this one has given up on the dull colors and went with flashy neon ones, making it so much nicer to look at. This is where I wonder why they didn't include HDR though. With these colors, HDR would have been the cherry on top of the cake. It runs in both 21:9 and 32:9 natively, so ultra-wide is not an issue here. The game is also optimized very well, thanks to which you can easily maintain high frame rates even when things are getting quite crazy gameplay wise. The story of the game is its own and doesn't seem to be related to the previous one in any way. The issue here is that you never really get to see much of it. You choose your character's sex and are immediately placed in the middle of a battlefield. The woman who raised you dies, killed by the antagonist, and you vow to take vengeance. The problem with such an approach is that we, the player, have no idea who these people actually are. We were given very little time to get to know them, and now the dying NPC is here and we can't share our character's pain. The only game which managed to make me care for a character in just a few minutes at the start before said character dies right at the beginning was The Last of Us. It was done masterfully, and perhaps it had a strong effect on me because I am a man, and seeing the protagonist's daughter die in his arms triggers some sort of primal instinct within me. Regardless, given the fact that pulling this off is extremely difficult, I don't believe it should ever be done because the chances of doing it right are so low. So now our character is told that in order to fight the enemy, he has to contact 3 people who will help him. You are giving their locations, a car, a rifle, and a special ranger suit which enhances your abilities, similarly to how it was done in the game Crisis. From that moment on, you are free to either go for the missions or explore the map. The game strategically hooks you by telling you that your suit can gain additional abilities if you find specific arcs. A few of them are even marked on your map from the start, the others you gotta search for yourself. This is where the different players will approach this differently. I'm someone who loves to explore these giant sandboxes, and if you hold a carrot on a stick in front of me like that, I will chase it. So I went for the arcs and it became addictive very quickly. Along the way I would stop, take over some bandit fortress, lift a roadblock, kill some mutant boss. There was stuff to do and I was all for it. The difficulty of each map activity is indicated, and the indicator is a number between 1 and 10. But there is something extremely important to note here. The game does not restrict you with levels or any other limiters. This means that you can go anywhere on the map from the start of the game and you can attempt to fight any boss or take over any fortress from the start and have a real chance of doing that. Naturally, it will be harder due to the fact that you will have less powers and less weapons at your disposal, but it is absolutely doable. There are no enemies whose level is so high that they don't take damage from you while you die in one hit like in some other games. There are also no roadblocks on the map, which would restrict you from physically approaching a certain section of it, which can only be passed, for example, by doing some future mission stuff that we see in other games. I love that, and before I knew it, I spent 8 hours just roaming the map and doing all kinds of things, not doing a single actual quest. I got all the arcs, so I had all the abilities and weapons at my disposal. I got so many upgrade points that I managed to upgrade most of the things which I wanted. At some point I unlocked a helicopter which enabled me to fly through the map instead of having to drive. This made exploration so much faster and convenient. After I had all the arcs and had finished about 70% of all map activities, I decided it was time to go for some missions. Before I talk about them, I want to explain why I was able to do these map activities for such a long time before they became boring. The main reason for this is the game's combat system. In one word, it's fantastic. The flow of it is so good, it felt strangely familiar. Once I found all the weapons, I realized that it all resembles a lot like Doom, even the weapons themselves. I checked online, and it turns out that id Software were involved in the game's development. The combat is fast and visceral. You use your weapons, your superpowers, and after a certain amount of kills you can trigger an overdrive ability which heals you as you kill enemies, causes enemies to explode in a bloody mess upon death, and gives a bunch of other beneficial effects. It's awesome, and the best part is that each weapon has a special overdrive mode, motivating the player to try different things out. Most of them also feature alternative fire modes. all of this makes you feel like a god of death on the battlefield. The enemies are your playthings. It is absolutely glorious. Another thing to consider is that the game actually rewards you constantly. Every activity gives you various points, money, etc. All things you want to have. There was, however, one thing that I really hated, and that's related to the activities. You see, an activity, which would be just a point at the map, whether it's a fortress or something else that you have to liberate something on the map. An activity is completed once the main objective is done, but you still see it as a glowing marker on the map because the side objectives are not finished. The main objectives are something like kill all enemies in the camp to liberate it, whereas the side ones usually involve looting all the chests, finding all the logs, etc. This would have been no problem if these chests and logs were not intentionally hidden. Later I found out that there is a unique upgrade which makes it much easier to find them, because it actually gives you somewhat of a hot or cold indicator when you're closer to them. But for the most part, I had to do it the old-fashioned way, by searching, because if you remember, I hadn't done any quests by now, and in order to get these upgrades, you first need to become friends with some of the quest givers for the upgrades to actually become available. Now, so it's kind of on me, and I admit that, but I have to be honest, this is something that bothered me while I was playing it. Later on I found out it was kind of my fault, but it pissed me off. The actual activities are repetitive in their nature, but there are slight variations which help fool the player for the first few hours. Something I noticed early on was the fact that the world does appear a bit empty. There are tiny groups of people doing their own thing on the side of the road, but those feel like last-minute additions because they're literally small clusters of enemies placed randomly along the roads. Since there are different factions of enemies, they will at times fight amongst each other, and you'll see it, but it just feels like it's all very artificial. I've managed to find only one type of animal, if we don't count the low-res birds that fly in the skies. It was some sort of a bison. You see it on super rare occasions. It's not aggressive and can be killed, but yields no rewards for doing so. I would have liked a bit more life, especially in the part of the map which looks like a tropical forest, or the other one that reminds me of a swamp. Those just would be teeming with life under normal conditions, and here there's nothing. I did mention that you get a car, you can steal other ones, but yours is still the best. It's also the only car that can be upgraded and repaired. Sadly, the driving in this game does not feel good whatsoever. For some reason, the vehicles are both slow and unresponsive. Even the racing cars suffer from the same problems. I was relieved once I got the helicopter, trust me. So after about 8 hours, I decided to do some of the game's campaign. I mentioned that, but I wanted to come back to it now. I went to the first NPC and started his quest. I finished it, and he told me that I had to now do his activities, and that once my reputation with him was high enough, we could continue. Little did he know that my reputation with all of the NPCs was way higher than is needed. As soon as I left him, he sent me a transmission immediately calling me right back to give me the next mission, which is cool. In other words, the game asks you to grind before continuing. In my case, I didn't feel that I would have to grind because I had done the grinding in advance in my own way and I had fun with it. But to some other players, this could become a huge problem. They could want to start with the missions, and suddenly they do a single mission. They're told, okay, now go and grind the map for a while until you get to a certain level of reputation before I'm gonna give you the next mission. This could be a real problem. This is where I wondered if I had actually played the game the way it was meant to be played when I set out initially. I assumed that I'm doing my own thing. Now it felt like I had been following the design of the developers all along, although I'm probably just reading too much into it. In any case, I returned to the guy and he had one more mission for me and then sent me off to the next guy. That felt very strange. You see, in the city where I met the first one, there were other NPCs. Some of them asked me to do something by going to some of the activity places. Since I had already done those, they simply paid me. The thing is, this meant that all side missions were literally just a way to redirect the player to the map activities. There weren't any special tasks related to them. It's just go to this place and do what the activity objective is, just as you would have if I had not sent you there. A quest which just tells you play the game as if I wasn't here is no quest at all. So that those side quests didn't feel like side quests at all, because they, yet again, they didn't really give you any task. They just said go out and just, it says, for example, you have like in this particular part of the map, you have like 30 activities. He says just do this particular one, which you could do in any case if you just go through them. It doesn't have to be for this guy, just this guy wants that one, and if you've done it, even better, you get rewarded on the spot. Now I know side quests can often be like that, but for example, just take an example, let's say Skyrim. If I go to some place and I have to collect some quest item, and I go and I just explore it, find a quest item, collect it, and then later I find a guy and he's like, yeah, they stole my father's sword, I want you to reclaim it. I'm like, is this the sword? And he's like, yeah, here's your money. You know, that makes some sense. And I do understand also if some guy would just tell me, go and kill these guys, they murdered my family, you know, it would make sense. But if every quest is literally just a redirection like that, it seems very strange. And that was literally the case with all the side quests, without exception. So then I went to the next NPC and I had the same situation. I did one mission, was told to grind reputation, and since I already had it, was given a second mission pretty much instantly. Then I had to go to the last NPC, and guess what? The cycle repeated there. After that, I got one last mission. So after doing 2 missions for each of the 3 NPCs, I got one last mission, the final mission of the game. In total, there are 7 campaign missions, I kid you not. This left me feeling like it would be some kind of a joke ending and the game would offer more content. Things, you know, don't happen like that in these games. When I remember Grand Theft Auto, for example, you would have a ton of missions. You have your campaign missions, but then you also have tons of side missions, which are often just as good, if not better, than the ones that are from the campaign. The problem with having so little in terms of story content is that we never have a chance to get to know any of the other characters either. At one point, you are asked to complete a race, which is part of one of those missions, by the way, that I mentioned. If you have played the first game, you will remember that racing was a big part of it. There were even different types of races, etc. Here you just race on the same track with the same car, and the only thing you can unlock are different skins for your car. That's it. And it really sucks. This is where I am torn between excitement and disappointment. You see, overall I did enjoy the game. Once finished, it felt like a satisfying experience, especially because of the awesome combat system. But it also felt really short, way too short for such a game. It simply needed a lot more content. It's a classic case of not fulfilling the buyer's expectations. When I play Doom, I expect shooting monsters and bosses for 7 to 9 hours with a superficial story in the background and awesome music. When I play Rage, I expect RPG elements, a large open world, many quests, and a narrative-driven story with some vehicular combat mixed into it. Mad Max was a similar game and it worked really well, although its combat was nowhere near this in Rage. Rage is not a bad game. On the contrary, it's quite good for what it is. The problems arise from what it is not. I'm disappointed because I feel like Avalanche Studios missed out on an opportunity to create a phenomenal game and decided that a good game was simply good enough. If they had given me a good story and a much longer campaign, I would be here today praising the game and telling everyone to get it. Instead, however, I stand here reluctantly recommending it. As I have said, it's still a great game. Well, good really. But it offers a lot of fun. Still, it's not the full package, so I feel like it's not worth the full $60 it costs. So should you buy this game? Generally yes, but perhaps wait for the price to drop a bit. It's a lot like a pretty girl with no character at all. She looks really nice at first glance, but the more you spend time with her, the more you realize that there is very little besides her looks and how good she is at fighting with other girls. Not a very good analogy, but you get it. The game looks nice and has an awesome combat system. We've come to the end of my review. Thank you for taking your time to watch it. I always appreciate a friendly comment, and in case you want to support my channel, take a look at my Patreon link in the description of this video. Have a great day, and again, thank you for watching.